As collectors, we are always looking for the most affordable, convenient, and trustworthy sources that we can find to purchase our new vinyl records. And while there is no definitive answer to this question, as it's very subjective in nature, I think we can all agree that some sources are better than others. So get ready to take notes and scan QR codes for discount codes as we talk about the finer details of what I consider to be the best place for collectors of all types. So if you're new here, welcome in, and if you're a repeat offender, welcome back. I'm Johnny, this is Channel 910, and this is what you need to know about Whatnot. Whatnot is an online application that offers live interactive auctions as well as plenty of buy it now options. And I did mention that Whatnot is a place for collectors of all types. Some of Whatnot's bigger categories include things like sports cards, Pokemon, sneakers, designer clothing and accessories, estate sales, storage unit finds, among others. But what we're going to focus on today is what's really important. Fossils. Of course, vinyl records. Now, there is a healthy music category that includes everything from random memorabilia to concert t-shirts to cassette tapes. But we're going to focus on what you guys clicked on this video for, those little plastic circles. So simply put, Whatnot is a place where people can go to buy and sell things that they collect in a live environment. And while the auction aspect of Whatnot is kind of the biggest draw to it, there are other options to buy things immediately without having to go through the auction itself, and we'll cover some of that later. So Whatnot was founded in 2019, so it's not really that old of a company. I actually started using Whatnot as a buyer in late 2021, but then Channel 910 became a seller on the platform in September of 2022. And that segues us into the next section that I want to cover, buying and selling on Whatnot. Buying on Whatnot feels very familiar to other ways that you've been used to buying online, with one big difference: the live interactive aspect. So once you create your account on Whatnot, you're able to go into whatever category you want and kind of navigate around different sellers' live streams and go directly in and interact with them and start building relationships. Relationships much similar to those that you would have at your local record store. And you get to know these sellers and their reputation and their areas of expertise, and they get to know you as a buyer and what your interests are and how they can best cater to you and your needs. So ultimately, Whatnot is a great place for you to meet other people who share your passion for music, both buyers and sellers. Due to the interactive nature of Whatnot and the live auctions, it makes it really easy for you to ask questions to these sellers. So ask questions. So any good seller will offer you answers openly and honestly to help clarify any questions so that you can make an educated and informed purchase. But my word of advice is, if a seller is unable or unwilling to answer your question honestly, then just move along and find another seller that is willing to actually interact with you positively and give you good feedback on your question. And that brings me to another kind of related piece of Whatnot advice, and that's don't spend all your time in just one place. There are loads of great sellers in the vinyl category that all kind of specialize in something different. So check them out. And the really good sellers are the ones that are able to admit when they don't have something or are going to have trouble getting something for you, and that they can recommend another seller on the platform that can meet your needs as a customer. And that's one of the great things about Whatnot, is that it creates this community of people, both the sellers and the buyers all together. And that concept community kind of relates to something else that I want to bring up because it really irks me. If you choose to be part of this interactive Whatnot community, please don't price shame or purchase shame. And what exactly do I mean by this? For instance, if a seller has an item and they have a certain price set on it, and you think it's higher than what it should go for, then just don't bid on it. And there's no need to say things like, well, the Discogs median price is this, or, someone would be dumb to pay that much. Just move along. Ultimately, you don't know what the seller has in that item, or it could be some rare variant, or to be honest, you just probably didn't do your homework. And equally, don't make snarky comments in the chat if someone ends up paying more than what you think is justifiable for an item. I've said in a previous video, something is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. If someone is willing to pay a little more than what you think is reasonable, just let them do it. I will admit that sometimes in the auctions, it gets a little heated and competitive, and it ends up being about beating the other guy than it is about actually getting that item for a good price. It does happen. But you never know what that seller's going to do. If they know that it went kind of above where it should have gone, maybe they'll add something a little extra in the package when they send it out, or maybe they'll send a coupon code for a future discount. You never know. So there's no need to make a big deal about it. So there's no need to put something in the chat like, how stupid are you? You just paid $50 for a $10 record. Again, maybe you didn't do your homework. So if you are this type of person that just cannot help yourself, then maybe the Whatnot community is not for you. But if you're able to keep your unwanted opinions to yourself, then welcome to the community. And what better way to welcome you to the community than with a bit of free money? So if you're new to Whatnot, all you have to do is scan this QR code and you get $15 to use however you would like. It doesn't even have to be with Channel 910, but we would greatly appreciate if it was. It's just Whatnot's way of welcoming you to the app. But now let's talk about the other side of the coin. There's also a coin category in Whatnot: selling. As stated earlier, Channel 910 has been selling on Whatnot for over 3 years, and while we do use other online platforms to sell as well, Whatnot is by far the easiest, the most fun, and hands down the most interactive of the methods that we use. And just like I recommended making meaningful relationships as a buyer on Whatnot, it's sometimes even more important to create relationships as a seller. We have certain buyers that we've been able to develop relationships with that let us kind of create lists with them for their want list so that then we can go and seek out what it is they're looking for. We love to hunt, so this actually benefits both parties. Getting to know our regular customers also allows us to make recommendations musically based off of their likes and interests. Even if it's something that we don't carry in our inventory, I can always point them in the direction of another seller that might be able to take care of their needs. And that brings me to relationships with other sellers. We have cultivated some very meaningful relationships with other sellers on the Whatnot platform. Now, these relationships have both professional and personal benefits. We have legitimately made some really good friends through this platform. I have found that treating other sellers as your peers and not necessarily your competition goes a long way in making you successful on the Whatnot platform. I've found it doesn't do any good to be jealous of other people's success on the platform. Just keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully success will find you as well. Honestly, if the successful sellers truly want to be committed to the vinyl community, then they'll be part of the vinyl community. I would caution to say beware of any successful seller who insists on being a lone wolf. One of the most important things that we have noticed that really helps to build a positive rapport with buyers is good, honest, open communication. Don't hide things or fluff stuff to make it sound better than it actually is. If a record is a strong VG, just say that and don't call it VG+. Just admit that there's a couple little flaws on it. If there's going to be a shipping hold up, just let the customer know. Just treat your buyers like you would want another seller to treat you. Because, spoiler alert, most sellers are buyers too. Transparency is key. If you're a dirty liar, the customer's gonna pick up on it and they're gonna drop you like a bad habit. No one likes a poser, which kind of leads me to my next point. It's okay to specialize. I actually think it's better if you do specialize in something. A jack of all trades, master of none is not necessarily the best trait to have here. If I go to a shop where the seller has everything from rock to Ethiopian jazz to ambient electronic to world music, polka, kids' tunes, whatever, yeah, that's great selection, but does that seller actually know anything about what it is they're selling? And maybe you don't care about that. You're just wanting the record. You don't care if the person actually likes it, and that's fine. But from what I have found in my experience buying on this platform, if you buy from someone who is passionate about what it is they sell, who is knowledgeable about what it is they sell, you're going to get a superior product and overall a better experience. And a lot can be said for passion. It has a big part of what we do as sellers here on Whatnot. And I feel like buyers can see that. But sometimes passion can backfire. Whatnot offers the ability to set your start price as a seller. Now, I'm going to touch on this a little bit more during the pros and cons section. But while we're talking about selling specifically here, you need to be okay with what you start your item at. If a large audience is what you're after, then dollar starts are a great way to bring in a lot of people to a live stream. Everybody likes a steal. But if you start a $100 record at $1 and it sells for $25, you can't get mad. You did this to yourself. I've been in streams and seen instances where something doesn't sell for enough money based on the seller's opinion, and that seller will blame the entire audience, just a blanket statement that it didn't sell for enough money when it's their own damn fault for starting it at $1. Just own it. Personal experience, at Channel 910, we only start stuff at $1 when it's something that we're willing to take that risk on. Sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. You just move along. And speaking of moving along, let's move along into some of the pros and cons of using Whatnot. But before we get into that, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Comment and share, as those things help move along the videos in the algorithm. Doing so would be greatly appreciated and almost perfect. But since nothing is 100% perfect, let's talk about some of the pros and cons of using Whatnot. So I'll start with some of the positives, and the first positive I can think of is convenience. You can do all of your online shopping from the convenience of your home or wherever you choose to. And maybe you're in a situation where you don't have a local record store, it's not easy to get to, or maybe you just don't want to get out to go there. Whatnot offers you the ability to do this from wherever you find to be comfortable and convenient. Another positive is 24-hour operations. Because there are sellers in all the different time zones across the country and even outside the country, there are always going to be options for you to find what you're looking for on Whatnot. Now, while shows do tend to kind of gravitate towards what is considered prime time slots, regardless of the hour, there's always going to be something you can find in a live stream. Another positive, it's interactive. I've already talked about this multiple times in this video, and there's really no other option other than physically going to a brick and mortar store that you're going to get more interactive than you can on Whatnot, hands down. Another positive is that low starts can mean huge deals on Whatnot. I talked about dollar starts earlier, and there are sellers out there that have found a lot of success doing these low start auctions, and I have seen some stuff go for some stupidly low prices. The deals are definitely out there, and this is a huge pro for buyers on Whatnot. So now let's take a look at a few of the negatives or the cons with Whatnot. And the first one that I can really think of is that while interactive, and that's a huge pro, the con with that is that it's still not a hands-on experience. Ultimately, you're taking the word of the seller in regards to the condition of the product. And some sellers are better at this than others. And unfortunately, you kind of have to experiment in the beginning to figure out who's good at this and who is not. Oftentimes you can trust your gut. And if a seller seems kind of questionable, but they've got some stuff that looks like it might be really good, then maybe take a chance on one or two things. Let that item get shipped to you, and then see how accurate the grading was and how well the person shipped the product. If they claim that it was a VG plus record and it shows up as a G plus or maybe even like a VG minus, and it was shipped loosely in a used pizza box or something, then you probably want to avoid that seller in the future. So another negative that I could think of is that the app itself is honestly very straightforward. It's easy to use, but the streams are not always as straightforward as the app itself. So what do I mean? So there is a learning curve, especially if you're new to the app and if you're going to bounce around into a lot of shows within the category, and especially if you're going to bounce around to other categories, you're going to notice that every seller kind of does it different. Some sellers will run 100% auctions. Everything is an auction item, while other sellers prefer the buy it now method. And a lot of us actually kind of mix auctions and buy it now all together. However, auction items and buy it now items are in different tabs underneath the seller's store. So if you're new and you don't know that there's different tabs, then maybe you don't know how to actually locate those items. It can get confusing. Some sellers also will preload their inventory. So before the show even starts, you can go in and actually see what that seller is going to have for that particular stream, while other sellers don't load anything and they just want to kind of surprise you as the show goes along. Meaning that if you want to see everything that's in that seller's show for the day, rather than being able to just go through the store and see all the items, you have to sit and wait for that person to flip through every single thing that they have. It's basically a hostage situation. Other sellers will use functions like mystery games or randomizer wheels that can sometimes get a little complicated with the rules. Other sellers will use sudden death options on the auction, which means you kind of have to modify the way that you react and bid. You can also bookmark items and pre-bid on them if you know that you're not going to be able to make it into a stream, in hopes that you can actually secure that item when it does run. And I know it can get very confusing. There's a lot of ins and outs. So if there's anything in particular you're wanting to know more about, or I said anything and you're like, hey, elaborate on that some more, drop it down in the comments and maybe I'll do a follow-up video with a little bit more in-depth discussion. So how does Whatnot compare to other popular buying options? Now, I know everybody has their personal preferences. So what I did is I just chose what I consider to be the 3 most popular options for buying records. If buy it now is your style, this is likely where you go to do all of your online purchasing. So I personally think there are 2 major issues with Discogs. And number 1 is that there's just a lack of detailed information per listing. There's no way to post photos for your individual listing when you're selling it. So when you as a buyer find the item you want, if you want to see photos of the corner or close-ups of the vinyl itself or anything that would help you make a better informed decision, you have to reach out to that seller. And that seller has to provide that good communication back and forth to provide you with the information that you need. The other thing that Discogs is kind of notorious for is poor grading standards. It's up to the seller to determine the grade of the record and the sleeve, and they're not always as accurate as you would hope they would be. Whatnot tends to close the gap a little bit on these issues by offering that live interactive experience. You get to ask the questions to the seller right there on the spot, and they can show you the record. And in the case of some streams, like Channel 910, you can actually hear the record being played live on the stream. So you can make the best informed decision that you can. Now, I will say from a seller perspective, it's much easier to list items in Discogs than it is on Whatnot, but it is much more sterile. So I hear you like auctions. eBay has long been the place to go for this format, but the problem is the length of the auctions. The shortest ones in the traditional format are 24 hours. Whatnot auctions run for literal seconds. If faster paced is your style, then Whatnot is the place for you. And that's not to say that every single auction is going to be lightning fast, but you're not going to have to wait, hours or days for the auction to be complete. Now, while eBay does offer for each individual listing to have multiple photos and very detailed descriptions, you still lose that interactive feature that you get on Whatnot. And I will say from a seller perspective that Whatnot is far easier to list items on than eBay is. Brick and mortar stores, the big glaring difference here is convenience. Sometimes you don't have a local record store where you live, or if you do have one, it might not be physically easy to get to it. It's downtown, there's no parking, it's just whatever the reason is. And honestly, a lot of these brick and mortar owners have realized this, and there's a lot that actually sell on Whatnot as well, because they've identified that this is a gap that Whatnot can help them to close. Yeah, I'll be honest, there is no substitute online that takes the place of being able to physically lay your hands on something before you go to the counter and pay money for it, but Whatnot is a pretty close runner-up. If you're not yet part of the Whatnot community, either scan the QR code here or find the link down in the description to get started. And if selling on Whatnot sounds enticing to you, it's very easy to apply through the app. Just make sure to use Channel 910 as a reference. It lets Whatnot know that an established seller has endorsed you. Any additional questions that you might have will fit nicely down in the comment section. I will try to answer all of them. If you happen to already be a part of the Whatnot community, what are some of your thoughts and experiences? I'll leave some room down in the comments for you as well. That's all for now. So until the next video, be cool, love each other, and if you're spinning, you're winning.